about data centers and new bills on data centers. Joining us now to talk more about what we can expect during the upcoming legislative session is Delegate Evan Hansen. He's a Democrat from Monongalia County. Thank you so much for being here on Midday, Delegate Hansen.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
All right, so let's talk about what you are going to propose as we count down to January 14th.
Sure, yeah, it's getting pretty close now.
I think there's a countdown just like New Year's Eve. I think there's confetti and everything.
Yeah, although I'm not sure how much people celebrate it. But I've got 3 data center bills that are ready to be introduced. One is about local control, and that addresses the concern about the bill that passed last year that basically prevents counties and towns from enforcing local ordinances on things related to like noise or light or setbacks from neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And that's been a concern that we've heard from people in areas where data centers are being talked about. And keep in mind that the bill that passed last year prevents them from enforcing these things for data centers, but also for power plants that are built to power the data centers. Essentially makes those ordinances null and void. So my first bill would restore local control to allow municipalities and counties to enforce their ordinances.
Okay. As we talk about this, and there's a lot of people who feel as though there's a lack of transparency when it comes to these data centers. And in some conversations I was having, zoning meetings, economic development meetings, sometimes those meetings that are on people's radars are not, or they're not on people's radars because they're not like the headline grabbing meetings. But when something like a data center then does move into a community, maybe people wish they paid attention to things like zoning meetings and things like that.
Well, I think you make a good point, but what that bill does that passed last session is it basically makes it so zoning isn't enforceable in these microgrid districts. And so, in a sense, it doesn't even matter if you were paying attention because you're not allowed to have a say anymore. Okay.
What kind of support are you getting on this legislation that you're proposing?
Well, discussions are ongoing. I know that especially in Tucker County with the controversy about that data center, that they're I'm hoping for some support from people from that part of the state. And, I think that we could still have the same policy, which is to promote data centers and microgrids, but allow local governments to maintain their say over what happens in their local communities. People don't want a power plant built 100 feet from the property line. There are reasons why there's local ordinances in place.
Delegate Hansen, this is Dave Allen. You said that there may be 3 that you were looking at. You mentioned the one about giving more control to the municipalities and the local communities. Tell us about the other 2 that you're looking at.
Sure. The second one is about the tax revenues. So if a data center and a microgrid goes in, there's going to be additional property tax revenues that are generated. And those property tax revenues would typically go to the local counties or the school systems or the municipalities where those developments are located. But what that bill did that passed last session is it took that tax revenue mostly away from the local entities and directed it to certain priorities of the legislature. And most of that went to tax cuts that go primarily to the wealthiest West Virginians. And so what my bill would do is it would redo that formula. So additional money would go to the counties. Some new money would go to the local school boards. But a significant amount of the money that's generated by these data centers would go to help PEIA, and that means it would help police officers and prison guards and teachers and bus drivers who are finding it harder and harder to afford health insurance.
What's the third one you're looking at, Delegate?
Third one is a transparency issue related to water, and this is something we've heard from people in communities where data centers are being proposed. And because these data centers typically use a lot of water, but there's not a lot of information being provided about where the water's coming from, where it's going, how it might impact streams and groundwater. So, for example, in Tucker County, there's some trapped streams trout fishermen are concerned if warm water is going to be discharged into these trout streams and impact the fishery. There's concerns in other parts of the state about whether there's going to be large amounts of water taken from groundwater, might reduce groundwater levels. So it's purely a transparency bill, and it requires the data center developers to disclose where they're getting the water from and where it's going to, and to make that disclosure at the beginning and then ongoing after they build their data center.
We're talking with Delegate Evan Hansen, a Democrat from Monongalia County. We have about 1 minute left. I just want to ask you, we heard Speaker Hanshaw a couple of weeks ago lay out his economic plan and perhaps getting back to some issues that you, the Democrats, were focused on at your Democratic kitchen table, roundtable listening events. I just wonder what your thoughts were when you heard what he had to say.
I'm glad to hear that the majority party is going to be focusing on kitchen table issues that matter to West Virginians. Like you said, that's what we heard when we went on our listening tour across the state. And, in my time at the legislature, we spent way too much time on these divisive social issues. And meanwhile, West Virginia is still last in so many categories related to jobs and the economy. So we all need to focus on those issues now.
Well, the countdown begins. Confetti is optional for sure. Delegate Evan Hansen, Happy New Year. We appreciate you. You can have confetti on New Year's Eve, that's for sure.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you too.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. We're back.